Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to today's edition of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel and hanging out with me a little bit. Always very grateful to have you guys around. Today we are going to be talking about if it's important as far as realistic finishes on a lure, how important they are, or are they important? Is it mainly to catch the fisherman's eye, or do the fish really like it? Because if you look at lure technology, guys, over the past 50 years, I mean, look at this 50-year-old lure here and look at a new megabass lure as far as, you know, the attention to detail and the realism, and does it make that big of a difference? So I got some pretty strong opinions on this that I've formed over the past 50 years of fishing. I think you guys might find interesting in today's video. Also, guys, a couple quick things before we get started here. Just wanted to remind you all that I've started up my on-the-water lessons again. Anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, just go to my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, and you can shoot me a private message for information. And also, please check out, we have our winter Fish the Moment Lake Map breakdowns up. If you guys are looking for some good places for like swim bait fishing and jerk bait fishing, this is a really good map to have for all the lakes across the country. I build these specifically for Fish the Moment. And also, guys, I will have my email address available to anybody that has a fishing question if you buy one of the maps, if I can help you out with it. So I'll put the link in the description of the video for that. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this, guys. Here's, like I said, the evolution of realism and lures out there. You know, true art forms today, attention to detail versus not so much a long time ago. Now, by just logical thinking and logical reasoning, you would think that a lifelike lure like this is better than one that's not that realistic looking. But it's a yes and no answer to that. It's like, yeah, a realistic finish is going to help you out, but that is not what triggers a strike from a bass most of the time. Most of the time, the things that triggers a strike from the bass have to do with how the lure moves through the water, how it displaces the water, the different sounds, the different vibrations, the profile the lure has. In my opinion, from what I have seen, it's like the action of a lure and the profile of a lure and the basic lure category has more to do than how good the lure looks realistically. Now, there can be like an overlap with that. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Back in, really it's probably the early 1980s, Bagley came out with a line of lures called the small fry. And this was the first realistic looking lure there was. All of our other lures before that were like this, but the small fry had like some type of a realistic bait fish print on it. It looked exactly like a bait fish. It looked like some of the lures you have now that look exactly like a bluegill or whatever. And I couldn't wait to try them. I was, a teenager then, and I got some of them, and I couldn't catch a fish on them. I mean, they were so realistic looking, and I said, man, I'm gonna rip them on this. But the fish just didn't really like it. And I'd catch more fish on my old lures that didn't look that realistic. And I got noticing the trend over the years about how this was true over and over again. Because think about it, it's like some of the glide baits and the swim baits that they have today, they look exactly like a fish. I mean, you can't, if you put some of the high-tech glide baits and swim baits up there, you put a live bluegill and a glide bait that looks like a bluegill, you can't tell the difference. They look exactly like a fish, but they don't work. The fish do not react to those even though they look real. So in my opinion, realism in a lure is not a prime mover to generate a strike. Now, it can help if you have everything in correlation with that. And that's why I like the Megabass Vision 110 jerkbaits are so good, is you have those strike elements that I talked about as far as water displacement, sound, vibration, action, combined with, a realistic finish. If you can accomplish that, then, it's going to be an awesome lure, but it's very difficult to accomplish that. From what I have seen, most of the lures out there that look very, very realistic, they don't have everything else in line with it. Because if you miss one thing on a lure, it's not going to be that effective. You're always going to be able to catch fish on a lure. But the thing that sets a great lure apart from just just an average lure, is stuff like that. Now, let me give you guys an example here of what I'm talking about. As far as, something that's, doesn't have that much attention to detail. Now, this right here, as I've shown this before, This is like an old Rebel Humpy crankbait. Now look how basic and simple that thing is. There's nothing fancy about it. You could probably paint this with some fingernail polish and it'll look the same, but this is a fish catching bait. Guys, I have got thousands of bass on this particular plug right here, and it doesn't look realistic, but there's something about the vibration and the profile and the size and the dimensions of the bait and the way it moves through the water that generates that strike. And I've got other lures up there that look just like perfectly realistic that I can't catch a fish on it. So where does that leave you? That is the dilemma that you have, because ultimately you don't know until you fish a lure how productive it is, regardless how good it looks or how good it does not look. I have been able to, I've never been able to look at a lure in the water and get a definitive answer about how effective that bait is going to be just by my perception of how it moves through the water. Because a lot of crankbaits that you reel through the water, they can have some really good action to them, and they just don't catch that many fish. I'll give you guys another prime example. The Megabass S-Crank, square-bill crankbait. If you put that Megabass crankbait next to some other cheaper square-bill crankbait, the wobble on the cheaper square-bill crankbait, side-to-side wobble, it looks more alive than the Megabass. The Megabass has a more tight wobble. It sort of bends in and out. And perception, from an angler's point of view, you would look and say, well, that wide wobbling crankbait's got a lot of action. The fish are going to like it. That's not the way it is. There's something about that Megabass S-Crank that has a tighter action, the way it moves and swims a little bit, that the fish just love it more than the bait that looks really good to me wobbling. So ultimately, you don't know until you fish it. But bottom line is that, when we're talking about, realism in a lure, it is not the important factor. Don't get sucked into, buying a lure because, man, that thing looks just like a minnow, or that thing looks just like a crawdad. I'm going to catch him on it. That is a factor, but it's not the most important factor. So best way to do it, guys, if you see a lure that you like, that looks pretty good to you, just get one of them, try it out and see for yourself. That's ultimately the only way you can know, because I bought a lot of lures over the course of my life, and I've got about a dozen lures out of all the hundreds of lures that I bought that are just fish catching baits. There's something about them that just catch a lot of fish, and that they don't maybe not look that realistic. So I'm not sure what the deal is. Another example with that, guys, is I've got some Megabass jerk baits that are super beat up. I've fished them so many times, half the paint's knocked off of them, and the bill's all chipped up, and the paint looks horrendous on it, but there's something about the action of that particular lure that generates strikes, and they overlook the color and how that bait looks in favor of the action and the water displacement and the movement through the water. So anyway, I hope that helps explain a little bit, guys, and we'll check you later.